Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran and you all know me. If you do hang out on the streams, you know how many meme builds I run for my characters. How many off-brand, off-meta covenants that I like to run for some of the classes and specs that I enjoy playing. But instead of talking about something unique, something interesting, something unusual, we'll actually talk about the meta and some of the numbers that we have for the current season for Mythic Plus of patch 9.1. The season is still very fresh, very new, but I wanted to put a video together of the most popular specs so far for patch 9.1. I always recommend you to play whatever you like, but of course everybody's gonna have that question: what is the most popular spec? What is the most popular class? So let's take a look at the data to see which classes are getting the most play and the most invites for Mythic Pluses in Season 2. Seriously, play whatever spec covenant you like. It really doesn't make that much of a difference. I would rather honestly play something that I have more fun with, even if it's a little bit off meta, than something I dread and something I do not enjoy at all. And I really do leave that advice to all of you. Everything is going to be viable for your 15s or maybe even certain 20s. Everything is eventually going to kill the final boss on Mythic for cutting edge. So honestly, play what you like. But diving into the numbers, we'll be taking a look at the tanks first. The tank is a stalwart leader of the party and they cannot fall over easily. So I was actually kind of surprised, but sort of not really, because bear druids actually have been getting more play, the most played tank for dungeons so far. These guys are a literal brick. They are a damage sponge. They'll just keep soaking it forever and ever and ever. Together with Incarnation, which for 30 seconds lets them spam Thrash until infinity, together with a legendary that gives you a shield every time you hit an enemy with Thrash. That legendary also gives you a chance to Thrash again, Thrash also being completely uncapped in AoE, in a massive big trash back pull. This is the tankiest class in the game that will literally survive 99 stacks of Necrotic. I mean, what healer wouldn't love to play with druids? And bears are, in fact, while easy, are really fun for that reason. This means a bear can do massive AoE pulls and just keep threat on mostly everything. Thrash does a bit of damage, but during Incarnate you do so many thrashes, you should be able to hold aggro, where your DPS should also be able to just unload massive unholy amounts of burst. Right behind them is Demon Hunter, still a very popular, still an awesome pick, with a lot of utility with different sigils, also plenty of mobility as you can dance around enemies, not getting touched, while still holding aggro as their specialty. Demon Hunters are still really good, but bears just take a little bit more of that cake for the amount of plays that they're getting. Then we have healers. The most popular one, but no surprise, is Holy Paladin. Of course, Venthyr is a really strong choice. We talked before about how Holy Paladins still have crazy amount of damage. It's not as insane of damage as before. It does have a little bit of a fall off, but they're still really good. Bubble, Blessing of Protection, Hand of Freedom, Blessing of Sacrifice. I mean, you come with a variety of different toolkits to help out your Mythic Plus dungeons. And during your Venthyr burst, you're basically a 4 DPS. So of course it's going to be amazing for groups. But right behind them on their tail, and could potentially surpass them, could be the Restoration Shaman. These guys have been pretty good at the very start of the expansion, weren't as good afterwards towards the tail end of Season 1, and looks like I'm making a resurgence for Season 2. A lot of them are actually swapping around to doing more damage, kind of taking a page out of the book of Holy Paladin, and trying to go for the Earth Elemental with big earthquakes. This legendary already dominates pretty well in PvP. But surprisingly, it's actually getting more play for PvE content too, for Mythic Pluses in particular. I'm very excited to actually check out this legendary for myself, and there's potentially a Kyrian build coming out for Shamans in the future with the new Kyrian legendary that I'm pretty excited for as well. So I would say that for Restoration Shamans, there's definitely a lot of potential, and they're really on the tail chasing after the Holy Paladins for #1 spot. For DPS, I decided to break it apart into melee DPS and range DPS, and because there's a lot of DPS specs in the game, we're going to go for top 3 DPS and top 3 ranged. Starting off with the melee DPS, obviously rogues are going to be on the list. A class that brings Shroud to let you group bypass and skip certain mobs just without having to burn invis pots is insanely strong in Mythic Pluses. But what's to note about rogues is actually, if you are not a fan of playing Outlaw Rogue, you'll actually have a lot of more options going into this new season, as Subtlety has been very competitive, basically neck to neck with Outlaw, and even Assassination is getting some decent play too. So if you want to toss the dice to the side, abandoning RNG and taking more of a fundamentally well put together, very fun and very consistent spec, then Subtlety might be your cup of tea. Outside of that, Demon Hunter is also really good, massive AoE damage, better single target damage. It did get improved in patch 9.1, and they also have very similar thing to Rogues in terms of the utility that they bring. Rogues bring a single target stun, Demon Hunters bring an AoE stun. So they're very similar to Rogues, but also very fun. I've actually picked up a Demon Hunter recently, and they're definitely worth checking out. Warrior is another popular choice on this list as well. They are not as unique as Demon Hunters and Rogues. They bring decent amount of CC, decent amount of utility, but mostly just good stalwart damage and group utility with Rallying Cry and Spell Reflect, which can be used to cheese certain mechanics. But these three would be the most popular and the most played, the most dungeon experienced DPS for the game right now. Then finally we have the ranged DPS. Mages, of course, are still going to be good, even if you're not end up playing Fire. Frost is also really strong, Arcane is also really good, but no matter which spec of mage you end up playing for Mythic Pluses, you're all uncapped in AoE. And that's going to be fantastic, especially with a tank like a Bear Druid who could just pull a bunch of mobs and just survive through them no matter the amount of damage and punishment they take. You can just gotta blast mobs away. Together with a Bloodlust as well as decent survivability, Fire Mages are still really strong going into this patch. Same thing can be said about Shaman. Shaman is basically a copy-paste of a mage. Also good uncapped AoE, quite a bit of burst, better single target damage if you end up talenting for it. Also brings a Bloodlust, also brings survivability, actually very similar token in general with Dispels, minus the totems that mage doesn't bring that the Shaman does. And of course, Boomkins are still very strong, even though Blizzard nerfed him a bit, even though Boomies are having a little bit of an identity crisis, whether they play Night Fae, whether they play the Venthyr, which legendary do they run, they're still pretty solid. They also have good AoE damage like everybody else, uncapped AoE, but also fantastic group utility. That hasn't changed at all, so Boomies are still going to be a really solid support slash big damage AoE DPS. It's also worth considering, as we're ending the video, that these were the most popular specs and classes in the game. These were not the classes that are going to have the highest keys in terms of pushing or breaking any kind of records. We were just talking about the popularity, just how many people are playing and how many people are getting invited into said keys. The meta for patch 9.1 for season 2 is ever changing. I mean, the season basically just started, so we're most likely going to see a lot of change. Without the finalized soul binds, we're still yet to see some of these builds really come to fruition, and most likely this list is going to be ever changing. Personally, I'm interested to see what are some of the different playstyles that are going to be on the rise, which ones are going to be more popular, and which ones are going to get even more play in the future. So I'm very interested to see how the meta will evolve after we get all our soul binds and everything else available. I think it'll be totally worth revisiting this video and seeing if anything changes in the future, or maybe certain new competitors rise to the top and become the cream of the crop. There's a lot of stuff we've seen with the new raid, as well as some of the early Mythic Pluses, and I'm very interested to see how the meta will change in the future. But thank you guys so much for checking out this video. A lot of you asked what's the most popular, what's the most played, and these are the numbers that we have, at least for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in another one.